Hi again, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the first of a 5-part series going over the basics of Leyning Torah. So this first part will be a basic Hebrew pronunciation guide. I highly recommend you don't just use this guide and maybe look up some other books, but this will be basics so that you know details for how to pronounce things really well. And then the next 4 parts will be going over the different sections or the different marks for the Torah trope. So let's get started. So the first thing that you need to know is what a Hebrew word looks like. What are its parts? When you look at a Hebrew word, you will see letters going from right to left, and you will see different marks that look like dots or lines above and below the letters. The letters themselves, the aleph bet, are consonants, and the marks that are below and above the letters are the vowels. So in order to get basic sounds, you need to combine one letter as the consonant along with the marks to form the vowel. So first we're going to go through each consonant individually, and then we're going to go through each vowel, and then we'll go over some other basic rules about Hebrew words. So if you look now, you'll see a picture of the aleph bet. What makes the aleph bet nice is that the first sound of each letter, when you name the Hebrew letter, is actually the sound that it makes when you're supposed to read it in terms of consonants. So let's use some examples, or we'll just go do this one bit at a time. Aleph. Aleph does not start with a consonant the way we understand it. However, it starts with a plain vowel, and that's what the aleph does. The aleph acts as a placeholder for the vowel sound to show up on its own. Bet starts with a b sound. So if you see a bet with a dot in the middle, you use a b sound. Vet is a v sound. Gimel is a g sound. Daled is a d sound. Hey is a h sound. Vav is a v sound, just like vet. So now you know, this is one thing. Some of the letters will make the same sound, and that's okay, you just need to remember. Zayin is a z sound. Chet is an anomaly. This sound does not appear in the English language. It is closest to German achlaut or ichlaut, if you are familiar with German. The best way to make this sound is to not try to do an H sound, but imagine you are doing a K sound. Notice where your tongue goes. Your tongue lifts and touches the back of the roof of your mouth. That is the area where you want to create the Ch sound, except a little bit further back, and you're not touching the tongue to the roof of your mouth. So Ch is almost like a K, in that's where the sound is coming from, but you're not letting the tongue touch the roof of your mouth. Instead, you are just letting that sound come out. It's almost like a French R, a back rolled R, but a little bit more guttural. Ch. Do not be concerned if it is hard. It is not normal for the English language, so it's very understandable. The tet letter makes the t sound. Yud has 2 functions. It's kind of like the letter Y. And so if you know the letter Y functions as both a consonant and a vowel. So it can function as a consonant like y or ya or yo, but it could also be used as a vowel sound. where it goes after another consonant just cuz, and it's just there. So how do you tell the difference between the two? Well, if the yud has a vowel mark underneath, then it's a consonant. If it doesn't, it's just there, and it's meant to be part of a vowel. That's how you know. The kaf makes a k sound. The chaf is like the chet, they make the same sound. I'm sure at one point they were slightly different, but for the purposes of this pronunciation exercise, chet and chaf make the same sound. Then lamed is a l sound. Mem is the m sound. Nun is the n sound. Samech is the s sound. And now we come to the ayin. Ayin is like aleph in that it's not really a consonant, it stands for just a vowel on its own with no consonant behind it, like before it. However, what makes the ayin and the aleph different? Most Ashkenazi speakers do not make this distinction. This is more a distinction made with Sephardic or Mizrahi speakers of Hebrew. But aleph is cleaner, or not cleaner, it just comes, it's more frontwards. Whereas ayin comes a little bit from the back of the throat, and it sounds just a little bit more guttural. That's the real difference. For the purposes of just basic pronunciation, you don't really need to know the difference. It's just, if you eventually want to make a differentiation between those two, that's the real difference. Pei makes the p sound. The fe, which is the pei without a dot, makes the f sound. Sadi makes the ts sound, which is a t, a t, and a s sound next to each other. Sa. The kuf makes the exact same sound as the kaf, which is the k sound. And now we have resh. Now, depending on where you're from, you will pronounce the resh differently. The resh is an R sound. You go r. The shin has a dot above it on the right of the letter, the top right. This is one of the few instances where a dot above a letter is not a vowel. It's a sign that a shin is the sh sound. That is an sh, sh sound. Then you have the sin, which looks exactly like the shin, except there's a dot on the left side, top left side of the letter. And that is a sign that it's actually a sin, and it's pronounced with the s sound, just like the samech. Finally, you have two versions of the taf sound. One with the dot and one without the dot. Depending on how Ashkenazi you are, some people will make a differentiation between those two sounds. For the purposes of this pronunciation primer, I'm not going to do that. It's a t sound, just like the tet. So that is all of the Hebrew letters, consonant-wise. These letters show up everywhere in the word, and they determine the first consonant sound before the vowel. Now, I mentioned all of the letters. There are some letters that look a little bit different when they're at the end of the word. And these letters when you name them, you add the word sofit at the end. Sofit in Hebrew means the end. So it's a sign that these letters are specifically end letters. You will never see them anywhere else. All of these end letters, you can tell that they're different because they extend downward. Most of the Hebrew letters are fairly compact. They're fairly small. However, all of these Sofit letters extend downward. So that's how you can tell the difference when you're looking at a Hebrew letter, which letter is a Sofit. It will almost always be extended downward, with one exception. So let's go through all of the Sofits. The first of the sofit letters is the kaf or the chaf. Depending on whether there's a dot in it or not, it'll either be a kaf sofit or a chaf sofit. This is what it looks like, and it just means you're ending the word with a ch sound or a k sound. The next sofit, and this is the exception, is the mem sofit. Unlike all of the other sofits, this basically just looks like a square. The samech and mem sofit look really similar. How can you tell the difference between a samech and a mem sofit? The mem sofit looks more like a square. The samech has a little bit of a diagonal cut at the bottom of the letter. Tiny details, but it looks a bit more circular, while the mem sofit looks more square. And the mem sofit is what it'll end the word with a m sound. The next type of sofit is a nun sofit. It makes the n sound at the end of a word. The next type of sofit is the fe sofit or the pe sofit, which means the word ends with a f or p sound. A very clear example of this is how you spell the letter aleph. You start with an aleph, the middle letter is a lamed, and the final letter is a fe sofit. Finally, the last type of sofit is the tzadi sofit. This just means that the word ends with a ts sound. And those are all of the consonants, both the regular ones and the sofits. Now that we've gone over consonants, we're going to go over vowels. There are 5 different vowel categories within the Hebrew language, each corresponding to specific marks. The first category is the a sound, then the e sound, then the e sound, then the o sound, and then the u sound. And together, those form all of the vowels you need to know. There are no other vowels in the Hebrew language. There are sub-vowels, but we'll get into those a little bit later. So, which vowels form the a sound? There are 2 that form the a sound, the kamatz and the patach. I will now show a picture of those on the screen. So what does it mean that those vowels form the a sound? Well, it just means that if you see them under a letter, after you say the consonant, it is followed by the a vowel sound. So if you see a bet with a patach or kamatz, you would say the sound ba. If there was a samech with a patach or kamatz, you would say the sound sa. The next category of vowels is the e sound vowels. These have two within this category, the tsere and the segol. These ones look almost exactly the same. They're both underneath the letter, and they both create a e sound, like the word bet, or pet, or mellow, the e sound. Not e, not like bit, but e. When you see either of these marks underneath the letter, you will then follow the consonant with that e sound. So for example, if you see a chet followed by a tsere underneath it, you will then use the che sound, or the che syllable. If you see a shin with a segol underneath it, you will say she. Now, tsere and segol, these e sounds, you can have a short version or a long version. That difference does not really matter to us pronunciation-wise, but it does impact what the Hebrew word looks like on the page. Earlier, when I was talking about the yud, I mentioned that yud can also be used as a vowel. extension. In the case of tsere and sigol, sometimes you will see a yud after a letter that has a tsere or a sigol next to it. That yud is not a consonant, it's just extending that sound. The next set of vowel sounds you're going to find is the e. There's really only one vowel for this. It's the chirik, and it's basically one dot underneath the letter. And so if you have, let's say, an ayin with a chirik under it, you will make an e sound. If you see a resh and you have a chirik under it, you will make a ri sound, or ri, or however you want to pronounce the R. Now, just like the tsere and the sigol, chirik also has a long version where you basically have the chirik under the first consonant and then a yud with no vowel afterwards. This is another case where the yud is not a consonant but a vowel. Then you have the o sounds. The o sounds are represented with what they call a cholem. Now, a cholem is not a chalom, it's not a dream, it's a cholem. And it's basically a dot to the left of the letter. This is sometimes confusing if you have a shin or a sin situation going on, but for the most part that does not happen, and if you see a dot to the left on the top of one of the letters, that is a cholem. You know you need to make an o sound. So if you see, let's say, a mem with a dot to the top left right next to it, that is a mo sound. If you see a tsadi with a dot on the top left corner next to it, that is a tso sound. Now, I mentioned before that yud can be a consonant or a vowel. It is not the only letter that can do that. I'm sorry, I only bringing this up now. Surprise! It's not a very fun one, but surprise. Vav can also do that. And specifically, it does that with the cholem. So if you see a vav with a dot on top, it is not a vo sound, it is an o sound. That is an exception for the vav, and it is one of two exceptions with the vav. Then you have the final category, which is the u sound. These are made up of the shuruk and kubutz. One of these is underneath, and one of these is attached to a vav, and that's what you need to know. So if you see a vav with a shuruk, then you know that vav is not a v sound. It is an u sound. That's the other exception. And if you see, let's say a nun. Let's say you see a nun with a kubutz underneath, then you know it's a nu sound. And those are all of the vowel categories within the Hebrew language. Now, I brought up these 5 categories, but there are other vowels. And those are, I guess, half vowels. And so there's a mark that is basically 2 dots vertically spaced that goes underneath letters. And that is a shva. It is the equivalent of, it's hard to describe, but it's not a real, it's a half vowel. It's not a emphasized vowel. It's, if you were to say the word about, or among, or again, that first A is not an A sound, and it's not an E sound, It's a half vowel. You're moving forward really fast and before going to the next syllable. That is the shva. And so you'll see that in a bunch of letters, and that's what it means. In Hebrew, there are two types of shvas. You have a moving shva, or a shvana, and a resting shva, a shvanach. The moving shva is the one that forms that sound. Again, about, amongst. That's the sound. That's the shvana sound. The shvanach, the resting shva, does not make a sound. It's actually a sign that you're at the end of a syllable. And so it's specifically a sign saying no vowel here, just consonant. So let's say you have the word b'nai, like b'nai Yisrael. The shva in the word b'nai is a moving shva. You may have a small vowel sound, b'nai. In the word Yisrael, the sin has a shva nach underneath. That is a no vowel shva. And it's just Yisrael. Finally, before moving on to other basic principles of Hebrew pronunciation, I'd like to talk about chataf vowels. These are vowels, but also not. Why? Because they all have a shva as part of their formation. So a chataf patach is a shva with a patach next to it, but it's one thing. A chataf kamatz is a shva with a kamatz next to it, and it's one thing. And a chataf segol is a shva with a segol next to it, and it's all one thing. What do you need to know about these vowels? They each have their own specific sound. The chataf kamatz makes an o sound, the chataf patach makes an a sound, and the chataf segol makes an e sound. These vowels will never show up on most consonants. They will only show up with an aleph, an ayin, or a hey. Why? Because an aleph, an ayin, and a hey cannot hold a regular shva and sound normal. If you try to do a shva sound that is no vowel on an aleph or an ayin, it would sound weird. You can't do it. Therefore, they made these specific sub-vowel categories so that if you have these letters, you can pronounce them. And that's it. So if you see an aleph with a chataf kamatz, it's an o sound. If you see a ayin with a chataf patach, it is an a sound. And let's say you see a hey with a chataf segol, it is a he sound. And that is it for the consonants and the vowels. So we've just gone over the vowels and consonants. Great, we've gone over that, but there are a few more details for general Hebrew pronunciation things. First, how do syllables work in Hebrew? Well, there are two types of syllables in Hebrew, which you call open or closed syllables. An open syllable is a consonant and a vowel. That's it. Nothing else. It is one letter plus one vowel, with the exception of a yud or a vav in those exceptions. So, for example, if you see a pei with a kamatz underneath, that is an open syllable. There's nothing stopping it. It is just pa. Now, a closed syllable is a consonant, a vowel, and then another consonant closing it. So, I used the example chokhmah. The chokh is a closed syllable. Why? Because you have the chet, which is a consonant, you have a o vowel sound, and then you have a chaf with a shva, and that stops it in its tracks. It does not keep going. And that's how you know it's closed, because the shva closes the vowel off and it stops it from continuing. Now, the ma in the word chochma is an open syllable. Why? Because there's nothing stopping it. It's just mem, kamatz, hey, ma. It just keeps going until you stop breathing. So those are the two types of syllables. Why is this important? I mean, it just gives you a better sense of how syllables are structured in the Hebrew language. That's why it's important. And then the final thing is emphasis. Where does the emphasis go in Hebrew words? Listen, if you've gone on the street and you've said good Shabbos to people, they'll say good Shabbos. In this case, they're putting the emphasis on the first syllable of the word Shabbos. That is not how you speak in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the emphasis is usually on either the last syllable or the second to last syllable. I'll give an example. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Setting aside the very choppy nature of what I just said, this is a line we say every day, presumably 2 times a day, at least. This is the Shema. Now, think very carefully over those 6 words. From a Hebrew standpoint, just Hebrew, every word that I just said had the emphasis on either the last syllable or the second to last syllable. The assumption to make is that it will always be this way, and if it is not like that, usually, and this is in the case of a Torah, like a tikkun, usually you'll see the line, like a vertical line underneath the letter where the emphasis should be. That is a meteg, and that will determine, for most people, that an emphasis is not in its usual spot. So what's an example of that? In the Amidah, in the Shmona Esrei, in prayer services, when you are going through a lot of the brachas, a lot of the blessings, you will often find before the Baruch Atah Hashem part, the word Ata at the very end of the sentence. There is a vertical line on the Aleph, which means that you pronounce it Ata. However, normally the word Ata is like normal Hebrew pronunciation, and it happens on the last syllable. That is how you determine when the emphasis is not where it's supposed to be. This is just the basics of the Hebrew language. I'm putting this all in one video. I am not a Hebrew expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just learn a lot, and I read a lot of Hebrew. If you want to get better or have any particular questions, I'd recommend maybe going and looking for a specific book that will go into more details about this. However, this is the basics, and I'm hoping that by going over these basics with you, that you will start to have an idea of how to put Hebrew sounds together to form Hebrew words in a way that makes sense. And that if you're looking at a page of Hebrew that has vowel marks, that you will not get very stressed and scared. That it should be, if not easy, understandable. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, I guess. And next week, I'll cover the first of 4 parts going over the Torah trope.